that, I'd like to welcome Mark. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Michelle, and thanks for the opportunity to come and speak today. To me, this is a really exciting day, and it's exciting for a couple of reasons. It really ties into the themes that Simon and Brian have both set up for us, which is we've got this amazing accumulated knowledge and wisdom around climate information, understanding what the projections are. And now the challenge for many of us in this room is to look at how do we go about using that information. How do we use this wealth of accumulated knowledge to make better decisions in the future? And it can be decisions about water, it can also be about bushfire management, a whole range of different things. So what my role is today is to talk briefly about the type of outputs that you can access in terms of this SA Climate Ready project. So what I'm going to do in the next 15 minutes is talk briefly about the detailed data, just a little bit of the ins and outs of that data source. Then we'll have a look at the EnviroData SA website. We'll take a walk around that, have a look, and for those of you who are interested in accessing the data, we'll be able to help you understand how you can get onto it. But likewise, there'll also be people sitting here today who think, well, I don't really need the detailed data. I want to know what some of the key headline messages are, and we'll be able to show you how to access that as well. So we'll jump into it. The first thing I wanted to do is just talk about the detailed data set, just to help you get your heads around the amount of information which is sitting behind this project and which is now available. And we'll just describe some of the different aspects. So there are 6 different climate variables for which the information is available. So we've got rainfall, temperature, the maximum minimum, vapour pressure deficit, evapotranspiration and solar radiation. So there are 6 climate variables, and 3 of those are the focus of region scale summaries, which I'll talk about in a few moments. We've also got information available for 200 weather stations in the state, and when I questioned Graham on this the other day, he said yes, there are 200 markers. I've counted them all on the map. So we know that there are 200, and they're spread across the 8 NRM regions in the state. So it's 200 weather stations for which this information is available at. This is based on 15 global climate models. And I've got to say, Simon's talked a little bit about the global climate models. As someone who does a lot of, I suppose, work around regional adaptation planning, for me, one of the really exciting things about this data set is effort was put into understanding what are the best 6 global climate models for South Australia, reflecting the impact of things like ENSO and also the Indian Ocean Dipole. And so in this data set, we're now able to look at it and say, well, what are the 6 best, as I'm sure they'll be commonly referred to, the 6 best global climate models for use in work in the state. So that's a really exciting thing. There's a couple of emission scenarios. For those of you familiar with the past work by the IPCC going back to 2007, that used to refer to SRES scenarios. Now the new lingo is RCPs, or these representative concentration pathways. Effectively, they're 2 emission scenarios, and so that's in the data set here as well. Also, with regards to the way the downscaling was done, there was 100 realisations for each of the weather stations for combination of global climate model and emission scenarios. So what I'm trying to do here is establish just the breadth of data that is available, and when you add all that up, you end up with 900,000 data files relating to the weather stations across the state for these different variables. So there's a massive wealth of information here upon which we can now draw to look at how do we better inform decision making in the state. So what data outputs are out there? There's really 2 that I'm going to focus on for today. One of them is around how you access these detailed data sets, and the other one will be around the regional summaries. And so the climate modelling's generated these detailed data sets. They're now available through EnviroData SA, and I'll talk about that in a few moments in terms of how you access that. You might be thinking, well, who sort of person is going to use that information? Well, one of the primary audiences is going to be hydrological modellers. There's a lot of great information in there in looking at, for example, catchment runoff. So hydrological modelling studies, and Simon's already identified a number of those, and Graham will talk about those further. But I think what's interesting here is that as this data becomes available and used amongst amongst the research community and practitioners, we'll start to see other applications. And a couple of examples that people are already expressing interest in is around extreme heat and bushfire as well. So some quite detailed impact modelling studies in terms of applicability. There's also regional summaries. Obviously, in putting together this information, there wasn't an expectation that people doing region scale adaptation planning were going to go look at these 900,000 data files. You wouldn't wish that upon them. What there is, though, now is there are summaries of the high-level trends available for the NRM regions around the state. And that information is now, as of today, available on the Goyder Institute website. So you can go to the website there and access those regional summaries. There's also a detailed report, 400-plus page technical report, which gets into a lot more information, as well as some case studies. And those case studies really are forming the basis of what Simon's been describing earlier on. And really we're recognising that, once again, there's a different audience for that sort of information. That's really those people who are interested in region-scale climate change planning, whether you're in local government, NRM, or regional business development organisations. Also, that sort of information is going to be useful for stakeholder awareness raising. So we recognise that there are multiple potential audiences for the information that's been generated and launched today. So let's take a little bit of a look at EnviroData SA. Some of you will be aware that it was released towards the middle or end of late last year, and it's really a way of accessing science and monitoring information on South Australia's environmental and natural resources, and it's maintained by the Department of Environment, Water and Natural Resources. So what we're now going to do is, one of those risky things sometimes in a presentation, we're going to go on the internet and we'll actually go into the EnviroData site and we'll have a look around. So if you type EnviroData SA into Google or your choice of search engine, you'll come up with EnviroData SA. If you go to the home page there, you'll see there's a couple of ways to access SA Climate Ready at the moment. There's up in the top left there's a link, or alternately you can go in through the Climate tool and then into Data Systems. But if we go into SA Climate Ready, this is the page. You might have seen this page getting flashed up behind the Minister this morning. This is where the action starts. So we've got a general introduction here on the first page. One of the things the introduction does is explain to people that there's different types of data available. So it's really important that people get to understand, do they need the detailed data sets or are they really interested in region scale summaries. There's other information available on this page. There's region scale summaries. I'll talk about those in a moment. I've already touched briefly that there are case studies in relation to some specific applications of the data. There's also a user guide available on this site. Certainly encourage anyone who wants to get in the detailed data, go and have a look at the user guide first. It's like when you bring something home from IKEA, don't try to put it together yourself first. Pull out the instructions and have a look how it basically works. So certainly encourage you to have a look at the user guide. If you're looking at accessing the data, you're basically coming through the Launch Data tool there. You can see we've got a map of South Australia. You can click on the map here to have NRM regions. You could also put down local government boundaries. So if you're in local government wanting to know what information is available in your area, basically click on that. That'll give you an overlay. But effectively what you can start to do down here is filter out what are the different types of data that you are going to need to access. So let's say, for example, I was interested in doing some work in Northern York NRM region. Boom, zooms into that level, showing the weather stations once again that are available. I've got a choice of global climate models. Once again, this is not for the faint-hearted, so you need to know the difference between different global climate models. But we have indicated in here with an asterisk which are the best 6, so those that best represent the impacts of ENSO and also the Indian Ocean Dipole. So just for argument's sake for today, we'll click on a couple of those. You see it says here 2 selected. You can choose your emission scenario. You've got a couple to choose from. Simon's already mentioned there that RCP is 4.5 is really it's an intermediate emission scenario. Perhaps some would say it's relatively conservative, whereas at the moment the Earth is currently tracking on RCP 8.5, which is really a high emission scenario. So for argument's sake, you could click that. You'll have a look at weather stations. There's different ways of picking weather stations. You can choose them from a drop-down list. So I might be interested in Drossen, so I could add that in. Or I could go over to the map and say I want to pick somewhere up north. We've got Hawker. You can add that in there. You'll see now it says 2 weather stations selected. I go search. Takes a couple of seconds. At least it did last night when I clicked it. As it's searching through, and basically what will happen is it comes up with a series of data identified in the table below here. You basically select on the data files that you're interested in, and then you go through and press the download button. You've got to remember when we're looking at this information, the total data set is in the order of about 1 terabyte. So when you're looking at selecting your data, you really need to use the user guide to work out what data do you actually genuinely need. And so once you've got your choice there, you press the download button, you're asked to accept some terms and conditions, you put your email address in, and you actually get sent an email that will tell you when that data is available for download. But basically, anyone who's interested in accessing this data, you can go home tonight or this afternoon, leave early, and sit down in front of your machine and access the data. So, and it is working. It was working last night. So it does just take a while because there's quite a few data records. A couple of other features that are in here. There's a series of FAQs. So they're technical FAQs though. They're not they're not general FAQs. They're really the tin tacks of what's the difference between representative concentration pathways, why there are 100 realisations of the model. So there's a lot of that sort of information as well. Under the help menu, we've got a bit more of an explanation, a mock-up of the page, which describes what the different aspects of the EnviroData site are and how you use that information. He says as he waits, seeing the circle going around at the top. I'll let that crunch through while we're waiting. That's what the help does. You can start over. At the end of the help, if you haven't necessarily got everything you need, there is an ability to go and ask some questions direct through to Juna. So that's basically EnviroData SA. So I suppose the short of that is that there's a detailed data set which is now available, but really it's designed for specific modelling purposes, and there is support